Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event from the Jesus College Intellectual Forum. It's great to have you here right at the beginning of the academic year. My name is Julian Huppert. I'm the director of the Intellectual Forum, so it really is lovely to see so many people here. And you're incredibly welcome whether you are here in person in this amazing Frankopan Hall or you are watching on the screens up here. Over the last 2 years, we've had people from over 100 countries watch. So if you're from one of the countries who've already been, it's great to have you, but you're particularly welcome if you're from Mongolia or any of the other ones we've missed so far, so we will check. Some of you know Jesus incredibly well, the college rather than the deity. Well, you may know both. But for some of you, this may be your first time here, and you are incredibly welcome. We have an amazing history. This was originally set up as a nunnery in 1144. And King Malcolm of Scotland expanded this space. He was also Earl of Huntingdon, which explains why he had this land slightly. In 1496, the then Bishop of Ely came to see how things were going and reported there were 2 nuns left. One of them was rather elderly and the other was of ill fame, which you can interpret however you like. So he kicked all the women out and turned it into an all-male college, something we have since fixed. But over that whole time, there have been people who have worked, thought, taught, done all sorts of things about the world as it changed. We've had amazing people. Archbishop Cranmer was here. Lisa Jardine was here. Clean Bandit, some of you all know Rockabye? They were here. Malthus was here. There's a whole range of people. And over the last few years, the Intellectual Forum has come together to really help to reach out beyond our own boundaries and to get that thought happening. We've run a whole range of events, and do have a look at our YouTube if you've missed any of them. Everything from having Jimmy Choo and Ai Weiwei to hearing about how we swear and the history of taboo language and why we say the rude things that we do say. So there's been a huge amount. Tonight we're going to carry on with one of the most important things for us as a species. We're going to hear from Bill Hartston about humour. What is it? How do we understand it? And how do we unify the theories for it? Now, Bill has an amazing pedigree in many things, whether we're talking about sloths, and there is a book over there, if you're not, or on a good bookshop near you, we have a good bookshop here. He originally studied here as a mathematician, started doing a PhD on number theory, but found chess much more exciting. Whether that was playing it, and he became an international master. We have a master of our own here at Jesus College, but I think she's only a master here rather than internationally. So he's done better than Sunita on that one. He's also done some other amazing things. I believe being the first person to balance the entirety of a chess set on a rook. Yes. Was one achievement. So, it's been already done if you want to try it at home. And much, much else. Professionally, he has worked on things like with Belbin. Some of you will know the Belbin team roles. About what your disposition is like when you're working in an organisation. That was also some of his professional work. He's written Beachcomber for the Daily Express. He's been on Gogglebox. He has a countable number of sloths, rather than an uncountable number, but quite a lot of sloths, and has written a number of books. He has done so many things. And really still hasn't decided what he wants to be when he grows up. And that was going to be my finish at the end. Oh, right, I'm sorry. You remind me slightly occasionally of my girlfriend who will do the same sorts of things. But so he's still trying to work out what to do if he grows up, was actually how I was going to phrase it. So, yeah. It's really wonderful to have you with us, Bill, to share this wonderful evening to think and talk about humour. So we're going to hear from Bill. There will be some opportunities, I think, to respond to some of that. And then there will be a chance for questions and answers, or whatever else you think will make humour work. Because, of course, but it all depends on how we manage to get the timing to work. Because I'm sure that the difference between a good joke and a bad joke is timing. Bill, over to you. Thank you. As I was on my way here, I suddenly thought that I should have called the talk "A Funny Thing Happened to Me on the Way to the Intellectual Forum." But then I probably wouldn't have been able to do the book plug. Whenever Waterstones have the sign "Book by Local Author" in their window, I think, surely that's hardly unusual. But I've been waiting for the Cambridge Evening News to have the "Cambridge Man Writes Book" headline. It's never happened.
what I'll be talking about is really to summarize the last 2,500 years of research and ideas on the questions of what is humour and why does it make us laugh? Which are separate questions because laughter and humour are different things but very closely linked, and no one really understands why. In these 2,500 years, we still don't have an answer, but there are some regions in which we're getting closer. I'll come to them later with luck. These are some ideas of what humour is. The first one, the victorious assertion of the ego's invulnerability, is Freud. The second one is a novelist's idea. The third one is the most effective flirting strategy. That has been supported by several bits of research. A funny thing, everyone knows it, but no one knows what it is, which I'm sure you'll all agree by the end of this. And the late, great Clive Barnes said humour is common sense dancing, which is beautiful. In 1956, Isaac Asimov wrote a short story called Jokester, which was about a professor, a rather eccentric professor who was seen telling jokes to a computer, feeding jokes into a computer. And eventually we are told why he's doing this, or he tells someone why he's doing it, which is to get the computer to analyse the jokes and work out what humour is, what laughter is, what the idea of the whole thing is. Eventually, when he's fed in all the jokes, the computer comes out with the answer that humour is a psychological study imposed on humans by extraterrestrials. And the second question he then asks is, what will be the effect of my finding out the answer to this? And the answer comes, the experiment will cease. And nobody after that finds anything funny. I hope after this talk you'll find some things funny again. Now, the first thing, that's Plato on the left, Sigmund Freud and Arthur Schopenhauer, all of whom I'll be mentioning later. But the question I'd like you to consider is, would you trust any one of these three people to tell you about humour? In fact, I asked, where is this? Yes, that's the next one. I asked ChatGPT, why was Plato such a sourpuss? And why was Plato such a sourpuss? It said, Plato was a prominent ancient Greek philosopher, a student of Socrates and a teacher of Aristotle. He is known for his contributions to various fields, including metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, and political theory, while Plato is often associated with certain philosophical attitudes. Describing him as a sourpuss might be an oversimplification, which I thought rather firmly put me in my place. Interestingly, if you look at humour in the Oxford English Dictionary, first of all, look at joke. It says something said or done to excite laughter or amusement. Amusement is humour excited by something comical or funny. Comical means intentionally humorous or funny. Funny means humorous, comical, or fun. And humour means the quality of being amusing. So basically, it's going around in circles. It's quite funny in itself. Mel Brooks, explaining the difference between tragedy and comedy, said, tragedy is when I cut my finger, comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. So that's really but on the other hand, this debate of whether God laughs or not has gone on for 2,000 years, with one side adopting the Platonic viewpoint that laughing is a nasty lack of control, so God can't possibly do it. But the other side points out that God made man in his image, and man laughs, therefore God must laugh. You may take your choice. But I'm told that there's also been the problem that both ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek had two verbs for laughing, one meaning to laugh at, the other meaning to laugh with. And it's always been the laugh at that people have objected to. But it's rather inconclusive whether the King James Bible translates them according to what the original is supposed to have said, or in fact whether the two words were used in the original to mean laugh at and laugh with. That's the. Okay, this was the quiz you filled in. The idea of this was to choose jokes that were typical of certain theories of humour. And I found this extraordinarily difficult because some of the theories didn't seem to have anything funny about them at all. But I'll show you the scoring, what you have to do with the thing and how we score it later. And I hope to collect your responses at the end and analyse them and produce some sort of results as to which of the theories of humour you most subscribe to. I don't think this has ever been done before, so it will be quite fun. It can't work, of course, because it would assume that all of the... what I really should do is choose jokes that are equally funny. So I should give them all to a large sample of people first of all, and make and select ones that are both typical of the theory and score equally among different people. So it doesn't work, but please do it, and I get lots of fun out of it. Riddle 7 is the most original one, and I'll come back to that in later with luck. Now, there's the other problem. One of the other problems is the vocabulary of humour. The word humour has been in the language It took a very long time for Plato's suspicion and disapproval of laughter to turn into a theory of humour, a formal theory of humour. And that began in the mid-17th century with the publication of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. He said, "Sudden glory is the passion which makes these grimaces called laughter, and is caused either by some sudden act of their own that pleases them, or by the apprehension of some deformed thing in another, by comparison whereof they suddenly applaud themselves. The passion of laughter is nothing else but sudden glory, arising from some sudden conception of some eminency in ourselves, by comparison with the infirmity of others, or with our own formerly," which sounds very much as though he supported Plato's view. Now that was the idea that led to, we don't want that one yet, which led to the superiority theory. Which will be the first of the theories I'll be talking about, which may explain the sort of laughing at humour that Plato disapproved of. But it really isn't much use in explaining jokes. If you look at the 10 jokes that you have in front of you, it's impossible to think that a feeling of superiority is a major feature of the humour in any of them. Just taking the first joke, you may feel that your spelling is superior to that of a dyslexic, or your stability and sense of direction are better than those of someone who walks into a bra. But that isn't why the joke's funny. The reason the joke is funny is, if it's funny, is a really rather complex thing connected to the evolution of a man walked into a bar jokes. And the idea that which no one could possibly take seriously, that a dyslexic might walk into a bra. As another example of my doubts about superiority theory, I can mention a piece of my, a family story of mine dating back a very long time to when my younger son was 8. I had brought home a book from work, which was a quiz book for children aged 10 to 12. Haven't seen the joke. This is the one on the left, as Schopenhauer would be first to point out, that an Aborigine and an aubergine. That's my my best flogging a dead frog explanation. So, but when I'd seen the joke, I had no feeling of superiority at all. I just adored the child for having produced this thing, and as he was only 8, I had absolute pride in him knowing both the words aubergine and aborigine. I thought it was quite precocious. A couple of years ago, I was reading Alan Davidson's excellent Encyclopedia of Food, and I came across something and immediately texted my son saying, "I have just found the answer to a question you asked me 20 years ago. It's India." And immediately he texted back, "So that's where aubergines come from." Now, theories of humour. There are more than just these 5, but and there's slight overlap between them, but they are maybe all theories are versions of these ones. We've met superiority theory, at perceiving foolishness of others, that's number 3. Incongruity theory was Immanuel Kant and Arthur Schopenhauer, esteemed philosophers. And it's more or less right that jokes do tend to have something incongruous about them. There's something is out of place or wrong. Freud had this curious idea of relief theory, that humour serves as a psychological release for repressed or taboo thoughts. I find that rather an attempt to explain humour by his own theories, which are about repressed thoughts. And there are several things wrong with it, which is why no one really takes it seriously today. One of the things wrong with it is that he didn't explain where he was talking about a build-up of tension, but how this tension builds up, where it's stored, what happens when it's released, a sort of physical explanation of what happens was completely absent. He just didn't. It was just purely an idea, and I think it was going back to the 4 humours, that there were these fluids in the body that build up. Now, one of the things that's wrong with probably all the theories is that they're not both necessary and sufficient. You can explain through incongruity, for instance, what all jokes have in common, but there are a lot of things that are incongruous that aren't funny. You know, anything in the wrong place is incongruous. So you want the thing to work both ways. You want necessary and sufficient conditions to produce humour. Then you'd be able to generate jokes. Now, McGraw and Caleb Warren produced this modification of incongruity theory, of benign violation theory, which was that the incongruity is fine. That's a violation of something you're expecting or something you know, or so there's something being wrong, but in a benign way. Now, the trouble is with all the people who've expressed this idea of benignness. Firstly, they don't distinguish between benignness in the mind of the person who's telling the joke and the one perceiving it, the one hearing it. But also, the argument seems to be circular, that when you have something, well, like the Mel Brooks, you falling into a sewer and dying, some people might not think this is funny because it's not benign. But I think the argument seems to me to be saying that if the thing is perceived as funny, then it's benign, and if it's benign, then it's funny. And so you go around in this circle of not being sure where to start, where the benignness comes in. Now, script-based semantic theory is an even more specific version of the incongruity violation thing, where we all have a view of how the world is and how it should be, and as long as you change that, you get the semantic theory is the meaning. So you get a violation or exploitation of established scripts or knowledge. But again, that may explain why a joke is funny, but it isn't a prescription for creating jokes. You can't just violate established knowledge and say it's funny. There was a version of incongruity theory introduced by French philosopher Henri Bergson in 1900 in his book about laughter, Le Rire. This was mechanical humour, which explains why a person slipping on a banana skin looks so funny. It's an animate being behaving in an inanimate manner. And Bergson, whose book was much more about laughter than about humour, said that humans slipping on banana peel are funny because they're jerking around and can't control the way they walk in a normal manner. Arthur Koestler pointed out that if this mechanical humour and an animate object behaving in an inanimate manner was the recipe for humour, then there'd be nothing funnier than a corpse. Pictures now. The Schopenhauer incongruity theory, I'd like to read you something, if I can find it. Yes, Schopenhauer's favourite joke. This is something he wrote in 1818. His favourite joke was to ask, what is the angle between a circle and its tangent? Why is no one laughing? Because you didn't understand this wonderful explanation he had. He said, and this really is flogging a dead frog. He said, if we consider that an angle requires two lines meeting so that if they are produced, they will intersect each other. On the other hand, that the tangent of a circle only touches it at one point, but at this point is really parallel to it, and accordingly have present to our minds the abstract conviction of the impossibility of an angle between the circumference of a circle and its tangent. And if now such an angle lies visibly before us upon paper, this will easily excite a smile. The ludicrousness in this case is exceedingly weak, but yet the source of it, in the incongruity of what is thought and perceived, appears in it with exceptional distinctness. When we discover such an incongruity, the occasion for laughter that thereby arises is, according as we pass from the real, i.e. the perceptible, to the conception, or conversely from the conception to the real, either a witticism or an absurdity, which, in a higher degree, and especially in the practical sphere, is folly. Well, as I've said, thank you, Schopenhauer. Don't call us, we'll call you. but I don't think it follows the the Veitch theory of. I think what that does is there's something else I've noticed about jokes, that it's quite possible that the violation that occurs is in the structure of the joke itself. When you're expecting a joke but don't get one, but get something that isn't. Now, why did the monkey fall from a tree? Is a clearly joke format, but because it was dead is a perfectly normal thing. Might have another example of that later. So the trouble really of all of the theories and the people who proposed them was that it's really two things. First, there is Karl Popper's idea in which he laid down in 1959 of falsification, that a scientific theory is only worth considering if there are experiments that could be done if it was false, to show that it was false. So there is a God can be rejected as a scientific theory because believers won't. There's nothing you can do to prove that there isn't, to show that there isn't. You can't test it properly. The other one, which is closely linked, is something called confirmation bias, which is a human failing that was identified by the psychologist Peter Wason in the 1960s. Confirmation bias is the habit we all have of forming theories and then collecting things that support the theory and throwing away the ones that don't. And Wason produced some very clever little experiments in which it showed that students doing something will try to support their own ideas rather than looking for things to challenge them. So all swans are white. You collect a lot of white swans, whereas it's a black swan that would. You should be looking for a black swan. Now, here's how you can mark these are the incongruity, relief, superiority. You'll probably disagree with these, but I think those are roughly the theories that they most strongly subscribe to. So you can get a score by adding your scores in pairs, as that indicates, which I hope I'll be looking at later to see if you have different humour styles. Now, the really interesting stuff that's happened recently is the brain. That is the brain of Pinky and the Brain. There have been a lot of psychological experiments done on humour which really haven't revealed anything until recently, when the fMRI scan was developed, which allowed neurologists to look at which parts of people's brains were operating when they were being told jokes. And there was I think the first study of these involved, they had deliberately to choose not very funny jokes because it's important that the head stays still. The first study was involved 60 jokes, which were 30 phonological, which were based on puns or double meanings. They were the sound-based ones, and the other half were semantic, which were based on meanings. So, as an example of a phonological joke, what's orange and sounds like a parrot? Correct, a carrot. Why did Cleopatra bathe in milk is a semantic joke. And the answer is she couldn't find a cow tall enough for a shower. And anyone who laughed would have been totally unsuitable for that. Oh, no, actually, they didn't use that one. That was mine. But they found that phonological jokes, which were based on sound, resulted in greater activity in the left inferior prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the part known to be involved in sound processing. But semantic jokes involved more the bilateral posterior temporal lobes, which are known to be active in language processing. But that one would expect from the way one analyzes the joke, not why you find it funny. But they did find that they asked people to give humour ratings, as I did to the jokes, and the highest ratings were produced more activity in the part of the brain that is associated with reward, which finally proved to us that humour that people actually quite like it. There was a wonderful reaction in one, even before fMRI thing, of a patient who was undergoing brain surgery for epileptic seizures. And the patient was conscious because they wanted to make sure you get the right bit of the brain. And there was one small area of the brain, when it was touched, the patient laughed, apparently completely naturally. And when she was asked why she was laughing, according to their report, when she was asked, she said that what she was looking at was funny, whereas it was just completely normal. Later, she said that wasn't right, that she was laughing at the fact that she was laughing when there was nothing to laugh at, which is very perplexing. Animal humour. I just want to go on to animal humour for a moment. For a long time, humour was seen to be a human characteristic. There were some brilliant experiments in the late 1990s when it was pointed out that rats emit a high-pitched giggling sound when they're tickled. And in 2012, there was a paper entitled "Laughing Rats Are Optimistic," in which there were two groups of rats, but one of the group were picked up and tickled at regular intervals. The other group were picked up at the same intervals and not tickled. They were then taught to respond to two musical tones and either press a lever or not press a lever. Now, one of the tones, if they pressed the lever, they got food. The other tone, they got a mild electric shock. So after they'd learnt this, they were then played the tone that was midway between the other two, and they waited to see if they pressed the lever. The rats that had been tickled pressed the lever. The rats that hadn't been tickled didn't. So it was the tickling them that had made them optimistic about having the mid-tone, or maybe the fact that they trusted their handlers. I think that would also explain it. Have I gone on too long yet? Okay, a little bit more. Skip that bit. And computers. There have recently been several attempts to get computers to write jokes. On the whole, these haven't been very successful. There were two computer programs, one called JAPE, which stood for Joke Analysis and Production Engine. Another called Stand Up, which meant System to Augment Non-Speakers' Dialogue Using Puns, which showed that computer programs aren't very good at acronyms. And one joke from Stand Up was, what do you get if you cross a frog with a road? And the answer was a Maine toad. Now that was given as one of its more successful riddles. Now, after seeing those, I had a little conversation with ChatGPT and asked it to compose a new joke for me. And it sent me a riddle that I'd heard before and wasn't very funny. So I told it that, and asked it to come up with, I said I'd been hoping for something original and funny. And it then came up with joke number 7 on your list of the why did the bicycle, I think it's joke 7, why did the bicycle fall over? Because it was too tired. Unfortunately, it then went on because it was too tired and could no longer stand up straight. And I said to it, I thanked it and said it was a really good joke, but much better if it just stopped at because it was too tired. And it thanked me very much for the constructive criticism and said it would tell its programmers and see what they could do about it. I did then look on the internet and found the why did the bicycle fall over joke some 4 years ago. And this raises two possibilities. One of them is that the computer had pinched the idea from someone else and was now claiming that it was its own. The second one is that the computer had genuinely created the joke itself. Now, as I've said, the first of these, that it nicked the idea and fibbed about it, it raises the disturbing prospect of computers replacing politicians. Nicking ideas and fibbing about them. But the second one is more positive. I said, if computers can produce decent jokes, it may be a small step for artificial intelligence, but a giant leap for Christmas crackers. And so, that was, the book includes a section on censorship in films and theatre and how the marks. This is very interesting because this is one of many cartoons based on the Frog Prince story, and it's definitely a semantic joke, but it's got no words. That you know the story of the Frog Prince, and that's clearly what happened next. And I had to get sloths into the thing somewhere, and I think the "Oh Hell, Are You Sure I Was Hoping We Were Lost," that was originally a Punch cartoon by Handelsman, but I couldn't find the original, so I used my own sloth picture. That's also semantic. It's based on our knowledge of the 7 deadly sins. And this one is possibly my favourite cartoon of all time, which dates back to the 1930s. I showed it to someone on just a few days ago, and she looked at it and asked me to explain it to her, and I couldn't. I just think it's very funny. Oh, and post-ultimately, there is where's the I thought I'd written it down. It's a line from it's a line that was judged as the best joke in the Edinburgh Fringe a few years ago, which was I had to select a password of 8 characters, so I chose Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I think it's enough. Yep, good place to stop. Thank you.
Well,
Himself puts the notes down and starts, secondly. And you don't have to share much knowledge to know that one doesn't start a lecture with the word secondly. But you do have to share the knowledge of language. And for that one, you only have to, I don't know, I couldn't explain it, but I think there's a wonderful incongruity between one's view of hippopotamuses as creatures that don't generally have days of the week.
Oh, I thought they'd eaten Man Friday.
They're hippos.
So there's a question right at the back there, and then we'll come to the one up at the front here.
Hello, thank you. That was great, very amusing talk. And I was wondering, or me as an international student, I was expecting to hear something about BBC sitcoms, for example. And you kind of jumped from the era of great Greek philosophers to ChatGPT, and the in-between was somehow missing. And I have a very specific question, because I really love Blackadder and Only Fools and Horses. Which one is your favorite? And yeah, maybe you could talk a bit about
Fawlty
this.
Towers.
Fawlty Towers!
A long way,
that
a
as
long, long way, yeah. There's section I skipped was on film, theatre, cinema, all that nonsense.
So, question up at the front here.
Thank you. It's great fun to be able to laugh at a lecture theatre, which I did for most of my academic career. This may be a very unamusing way of looking at things. My background's in linguistics, and I often think with language, it's what you take away. What's left behind is more fascinating than what you take away, which is a skill in linguistics. And I think what you've shown tonight, I'm no comedian, is the talent is in what's left, but a lot is does that make sense?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't understand.
So for example, we talk about A.A. Milne is a genius because so much is taken away and it's what's left there. The skill is in sort of, I can't explain this. Yeah, kind of what you sort of siphoning off and keeping. So it strikes me that what you've shown tonight is an example of really honing the skill of knowing what to take away. Do you see what I mean? So a linguist would say, a boring linguist like me would say, it's very hard to make people laugh with 5 words as you do in the first joke.
6. It's the shortest joke I know.
It's got to be. So if you said to
self-contained
somebody,
work. Yeah.
You can actually create humour from 6 would
Yes.
find that improbable, but you do.
Yeah.
It reinforces my theory.
Yes, the shorter the better. Yeah.
There was a question up at the front over there.
Brilliant talk. I've really enjoyed it. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll start with one because there might be other people who want to ask you things. I want to ask about your little test at the back and all the marking of the jokes. Are you trying to find out if people have a different sensibility to the different theories of humor?
Yes.
Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Well, what I want to do with all the answers is see what the average scores on the pairwise things that I've got is, and whether individuals vary widely in which ones they like most. There was a very interesting paper from the Harvard Business School of all places, in which they gave a long list of jokes to various people and had computers more or less and asked people how funny they found each joke, and did a factor analysis of all of the answers to see to see how jokes correlated with each other in humour assessments, and then they used the results of the factor analysis for the computer to predict on a list of 10 jokes or so. They asked people to rate the first 4 of them, and then they assessed how much they would like the other ones. They also got a partner of the person who knew them very well to predict which of the jokes they would like. And the computer did significantly better than the humans. But humans still said, even when they were given the results of this thing, they still said they would trust people to give them, to make assessments of how much they would like jokes, to make predictions of how much they would like jokes. So, sorry, was that too much of an answer to the question?
No.
Yeah.
Any more questions? You don't have to be sat in the front row or at the back to ask questions. Everyone else is welcome to take part. So I'll take one over there.
Great, thank you. If you're looking for a predictive theory of humor, would a group to survey be professional joke writers? Because their job is coming up with joke after joke. Every week they need 100 jokes for their show. They must have some concept of a working theory.
I think they produce jokes without a theory. It's just an inner sense of whether people are going to like them and find them funny. Yeah, I'm sure once they get a theory, then it won't work. They'll stop producing such good jokes, because there has to be originality in the jokes, and you get a lot of jokes that are really variants on another one. But see, my favourite "a man walked into a bar" joke is an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman, a Frenchman, a German. And it goes on with a huge list of every country you can think of. Tried to go into an upmarket bar, but they were refused permission because they didn't have a tie.
Right at the top.
Hi. Sorry. I guess I'm probably asking you to dissect a frog here. But do you have a favorite joke, and why is that so? Just trying to understand how. What would yours be to understand how I should understand my taste of humor?
I'm sure I do, but it keeps changing. I'll think about that. When it occurs to me, I'll come back to you.
So that was one of the questions from online, but we'll have to come back to that. Can I just bring an online question from Helen Astrid? Isn't humour more funny when one shouldn't be allowed to laugh? There is suppressed, inappropriate humour.
Freud certainly wouldn't think so. Goodness, I can't imagine not allowing people to laugh at. It certainly it wouldn't be liked by the person who was telling the joke.
I mean,
How can you not let people laugh at jokes? How do you do it?
I think the condition. I'm not sure I can put Helen's question, but it does remind me of the old comment that Freudian slip is when you say one thing and mean your mother.
Oh, I can tell you the funniest thing that I have seen recently. The man who asked what my favourite joke was, a long comedy sketch by what's his name, John Finnemore, on Pachelbel's Canon. And have you heard this? Yeah, it's a beautifully written. The first half of the thing is greeting Herr Pachelbel at a party and saying how delighted they are he could come, and we hope you'll grace us with a performance of some of your. Oh yes, I can play a Fantasia that I just. Well, we think an original composition would be too much, and it just goes on with Pachelbel trying to avoid playing his canon because everybody asks for this canon, which is now the only thing anybody ever knows about Pachelbel, and it ends up. With Pachelbel being persuaded, again, extremely reluctantly, to give a performance of the canon, in which he sings along with it, explaining why he hates it so much. It's just so beautifully constructed, the whole thing. It's a very long, extended joke, and it's just hilarious. I recommend it.
There was a question towards the back there.
Thank you very much. It's very simple, but I'm sure it's in the book, but you haven't said much about the visual side of humour, because my memory...
I've shown you 3 cartoons.
With words.
Yeah, one of them didn't have words. Yes. I think it's this. It's much the same thing, but I think that so many of the theories of humour seem to be word-based, but they still seem to apply to pictures without words. For instance, the one with the prince and the frog. Very often, I've seen this more or less the same picture with fairly elaborate captions, but just no caption at all is actually funnier. One of them has the princess saying. The transformation went very well, but he still retained some of his former bad habits.
There's a question up here. I'll try to get through as many as I possibly can. So,
I just wondered if
comedy writing for television, which centred on the problem of writing sitcoms. And I was there because I was writing because I had exactly the same question. Can you teach someone to be funny? And the guy giving the seminar was a man called Danny Simon, who was the brother of Neil Simon, the playwright, and was also a leading comedy scriptwriter himself. He explained to me, he explained to all of us how the knack of writing comedy is to writing sitcom comedy is to identify the characteristics of the main characters in it, and all of the characteristics have to be basically human things that you know, but pushed to an extreme, so that everyone in it can be laughed at by people because they recognise extreme versions of themselves in it. So I think you can teach people to improve their comedy by slightly altering things to push the level up a bit, but generally you can't teach someone just to be funny.
I'm going to try and fit in as many as I possibly can, but it may be somewhat quick questions. So right up at the top, firstly.
Okay, hi. I have a question on what you think is the future of humor in a world that's become so sensitive, and everyone has to put a disclaimer of, oh, this is just a joke, guys. I mean, where are we going in terms of trying to...
I think that there has been a constant battle for... since forever, between the censors and the comedy killers and the comedians. And the comedians, well, they always win out. They produce new versions of comedy, or they produce funnier things. But that sometimes you go through periods where political correctness is too strong. But I think the comedy will always win. And I think this is shown very much in the comic novels that we've got now. If you look at... If you look at the way comic novels have developed, they probably started with really quite literary works, but have got funnier and funnier as the world has allowed them to do so. And that now any novel now by Jonas Jonasson is my favourite Swedish author, who wrote The 100-Year-Old Man Who Disappeared Through a Window, who escaped through a window and disappeared. He writes, his novels are just so purely funny. They have no merit other than funniness, but that's enough. It's just completely brilliant that they take a comic idea and pursue it and develop it, and it's just wonderful. I think. But when the next Monty Python will appear, I don't know.
Can we just get hands up for people who have questions? I'll try to get through as many as possible. So there's one up there, there's one up there. Fantastic, and that may be all we have time for. I was just thinking about what you were just saying, that there's a really interesting question about what's comedy and what's abuse pretending to be comedy, and how we distinguish between those two. But that's another conversation. So up there and then up over there.
Hi there, thanks very much. It was a great talk.
Thank you.
I had an Irish uncle who could probably make this room laugh reading the shipping forecast. The content itself wasn't funny, it was all in the delivery.
Yes. Well, there's Rowan Atkinson reads a school register in one of his programs, and it is just hilarious.
Which of the theories explains that, or is there nothing in the theories? Is it all of them?
Yes,
about the delivery versus the content of what.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think one of the things that changed in comedy and greatly improved it was when comic theatre moved from music, vaudeville and music halls to radio and television, which brought on the era of the comic scriptwriter. And it's wonderful looking at scripts and comparing them with the delivery. And there are some... I heard once a wonderful example of this in Tony Hancock reading the words that were the words on the script were "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," and he was doing "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," and you could see that the scriptwriter had written these words specifically for Hancock, knowing that he would. And you get it with Groucho Marx too, that a lot of his lines could not be done by anyone else. Comic timing is so important.
So up over there.
Thank you. I'm interested to hear what you were going to say about Arthur Koestler's theory of by association.
Oh yeah. His book, The Act of Creation, was about creativity in science, art, and jokes, and said that all three of them share the thing that they take ideas on two parallel. Well, in scientific and artistic, in scientific creativity especially, you take ideas on two parallel lines and bring them together into something new. And the same way in a joke, you get one line that's telling a story, or telling a story in the mind of the person hearing it, and you then derail it onto something else. And so Koestler is very in favour of jokes as a form of creativity.
So we could, I'm sure, keep going with much more, but I'm afraid that is really all we have
That's
time
good.
for. So Bill, thank you so very much for sharing this with us tonight. It's been...
Thank you.
It's been entertaining, interesting, thought-provoking, not quite as many sloths as I expected, but, you know. So for those of you who are in the room, there are books available there. For those of you who are not in the room, there are books available in all good bookshops. Can I also just remind you that we have lots more coming up at the Intellectual Forum. So next week we have the amazing German author Sharon Duda-Otto talking about her book Ada's Realm, which is really fascinating what that says about relationships and Afropolitanism. The week after that, we have Philippe Sands, the lawyer, talking about Britain and the world, Chagos, Ukraine, and beyond that. We have tips from Emily Winslow Stark about how to write a novel. We're looking at young women in policy in South Asia. We've got the former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, coming to speak here. We're talking about displacement and memories of loss with the Australian academic Sheila Fitzpatrick, Britain's organic farming, Ross Atkins from the BBC on how you explain things, and much, much more. So I hope to see you here for many more of those, whether in person or online. But thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you.